Hello, welcome to Back to School Night. I am Mr. Sensenig here at Calico High School in room 406. I'm a member of the Social Studies Department and I grew up a local. Brett Sensenig grew up on Girl Scout Road in Shennick and attended Shennick Elementary, so that makes for some fun conversations with the students sometimes. Of course, I attended Cocalico High School and graduated in 1990, and then I went on to Messiah College in Grantham, Pennsylvania, and graduated in 1994 with a bachelor's in history and minor in political science. I then worked for a year and a half or so at a couple different jobs, including Herzog's Garage in Denver, who are relatives and family friends of mine. And then I went back to Messiah to get my teaching certification, and I did my student teaching at Northern York High School in Dillsburg. My first job was down in Shillington at Governor Mifflin High School, where I helped coach football and worked for 5 years. I came back here to Cocalico when a new position opened up, and I've been here since 2002. As far as what I teach AP European history, and I just started that last year, and mostly 10th grade world studies. I'm going to share my screen now so I can show you some of the things about our course. All right, the World Studies course page on Schoology looks like this, and have this day in history History Channel bookmarked at the top because that's a starter activity that I kind of do on a daily basis with the students. We take a look at this day in history, which looks like this, and sometimes there's videos there. A 30-second or 60-second video on the major events of this day in history. Lately, the videos haven't been working. I think they're changing something on the History Channel side, but it does give us a chance to talk about the feature story. Today in 1947, it was Congress investigating communists in Hollywood. That lets me talk to the class and get them activated about things they learned from ninth grade American history. And then down below here, there's other interesting and important stories having to do maybe with world studies or World War II, again, ninth grade American history, things we can talk about, things we can discuss. And it lets me bring in current events with the students. It also lets me check what they remember from other classes and just kind of activate their thinking and their brains at the beginning of class. There was a lot of important and interesting stuff that happened today, Wednesday, October 20th, for this day in history. So there was a lot that we could talk about today at the beginning of class. And so that's one thing I do with them. And then here would be an example of the folders, the daily folders in Schoology. I have them arranged by day with the current day at the top of the list. All the folders stay open so students can, make up work that they missed if they're absent. Actually, as you can see, if I click on today's folder, since the pandemic, we went digital and remote, and last year we did hybrid. So I have everything set up that way still because I didn't know what was going to happen this year, and we still, have to stay ready for everything. So in today's or any folder, they are told what day it is, and they have written instructions on the lesson plan of what we're doing here. Today we did this day in history, and then I have it still set up for Google Meets, even though we don't set them up necessarily every day. But when students are absent or somebody's quarantined, they want to be on the Google meeting and take part in the class, they just send me a Schoology message and I open this up. I left it organized that way because basically then this is just the agenda of what I'm doing in class, whether it's a Google meeting or a classroom discussion. So we talked about the reading that they did, hopefully, ahead of time today for Zimbabwe. And it asked them what they needed to get ready, and it had other materials for them to download that we were going to discuss. And then back on the page, when that's all accomplished and they're ready, they would take the Zimbabwe quiz just kind of as an assessment of making sure they understood the reading from the night before and got everything out of it that we talked about in class. And then we were going to watch some Savannah Homecoming, and there's some note sheets in there as well. And before they took the quiz, I told them to take a look at the Prepare for Chapter 5 African Transition Test assignment, because in here was the materials they would need to review for the test tomorrow. They could download those and work with those, and the 2 ACE writing questions or critical thinking questions that are going to be on the test tomorrow. So this is our main course page and how they can navigate through the course on a daily basis. I was setting this stuff up on Schoology and adding resources to this even before the COVID pandemic started in 2020, but I probably wouldn't have gone fully digital the way I did if it wouldn't have been for the pandemic. And so I was always a textbook and paper copy, blackboard type of teacher, and I still am in a lot of ways. But one of the things I did was I took their textbook and I scanned it and made it into PDFs. And so you probably won't see the textbook with the student unless they ask me for one. And if they want an actual textbook, I will give them one, because they don't necessarily need the textbook, because now I have everything in here as PDFs. Like if I go into yesterday's folder where the assignment was to read about Zimbabwe for today, read and complete chapter 5 Zimbabwe for tomorrow's class. Here is the Zimbabwe PDF, and it downloads for them, and they open it from their downloads and hopefully save it in a World Studies folder on their desktop. And it's the scanned section from the textbook on Zimbabwe. That way they're not carrying the books around, at least from the student point of view. They like that. But if they do want a textbook, if you would like your student to have a textbook at home or something like that, just ask me for one. And so that's how I get them their materials. That's just a basic overview of how everything's on Schoology, and it gives them instructions day by day. If they're absent or anything like that, they can always keep up from home. And if they are at home and they want to be part of the class, they can just send me a Schoology message and I'll open up the Google Meet and have them in. And we've done that a few times this year already. Try to stay ready for all that stuff. Now, back to the general course of World Studies. Let me show you these documents, which is the various syllabus or course descriptions I showed the students at the beginning, the very first day of the quarter, actually. This one right here is the department syllabus that everybody has agreed on. And this really does tell you what the course is all about and what we're trying to accomplish. The rapid advance in technology and the increasing importance of international politics and economics have caused the world to become a much smaller place. In order to prepare for global citizenship, students in this course will study the non-Western cultures of Africa, India, China, Japan, and the Middle East. Each culture's history and current situation will be surveyed. The students will be able to become more competent, reflective, and compassionate world citizens as a result of this course. And that was originally designed by me as an elective, and it went on to become one of our required courses for 10th grade. And I think our students have some experience with American history a lot in Cacalico. And they, through their language classes, they have knowledge of basic European history, at least a little bit, through American history in their other courses. What they have very little knowledge about or exposure to is non-Western cultures, parts of the world that have not been as influenced by Europe and by the United States. And so that's what this course focuses on. And there's a big focus on geography, anthropology, history, and current events. So the textbook that I had showed you earlier, right here, these are the sections in the textbook we use and which I have now scanned and turned into PDFs and have on Schoology for them to download and use. And, basic expectations. I used to make them have a textbook and cover it. Now it's all online, but they can still have a textbook if they want to. There's some basic projects here. A lot of that has changed since the pandemic. We went full digital and prepared for remote and all that, and everything was on Schoology. So I have had to revise some of the projects, but we still do maps just now. Some of the students will do it on PDF form rather than colored pencils on a paper map. And we do various things like section quizzes for each of the sections, which work their way up to a chapter test, and we're going to be working our way to a final exam. There's various writing assignments along the way. Like I said earlier, I have them do this day in history almost every day, where they do a little writing to explain some of the things that they found interesting or important for this day in history and why. That's to get them thinking, but also to help them with their writing. And then we'll work in other writing assignments with other resources, whether it's articles or document-based questions or films that I use. This copy of the syllabus is just my own personal one. It's basically exactly the same, except I just show it to you because this is what I try to emphasize with the students at the beginning of the quarter. I expect them to have enthusiasm, effort to learn, and the desire to succeed, number one. I tell them to fake it till they make it. Convince me they're interested in this class. That'll put me in a good mood, and everything will go smoothly from there. I think you guys understand where I'm coming from there. And then number two, individual responsibility, cooperation, respect. Calico students are generally pretty good with that. I want them to be prepared. Of course, they're not, if they don't have a textbook, they're not covered, but they're bringing their computer and getting on Schoology and keeping up with their stuff every day. That's preparedness, being prompt and organized. So those are just my own personal expectations and kind of the emphasis or priority I put on them. This is a rough course outline of what we try to do. Now, it's very tentative, and like I said, things have been revised because of how everything has changed with the pandemic. But in the textbook, chapter 1 is the global environment, basically talking about the 5 themes: geography and the 7 elements of culture, geography and anthropology. The second chapter, the world today, is how have human beings got to where they got to in 2021? It's basically a summary of the last 10,000 years of human history, from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution to where we are today in the digital revolution. And it just kind of gets us all on the same page and sets us up with geography, anthropology, and history. And then we dive into the units. We're in Africa right now. We're in chapter 5, African transition, but we usually start with geography and early history and some background, get up into the modern period in that region, and then what's going on in that region today. So we take a look at Africa, South Asia, which is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan. Then East Asia, we'll focus first on China. Then I usually go to the Middle East and come back to Japan, because I want the students to understand that Chinese and Japanese culture are related, but they're not obviously the same thing. So I usually break it up by doing China, then the Middle East, coming back to Japan. Everything's changed and been revised. So this is pie in the sky with how much time that I have, how far I intend to get. Sometimes I have to make adjustments on the final exam and things because maybe we don't get as far as we want to. But if we had extra time, we would certainly love to study Southeast Asian cultures. We have a Hmong subculture in this area, people who've come here from Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. And that would be a great unit if we could. Australia and Oceania, Korea, Latin America, Russia, all these things would be great for world cultures if we had the time to get there. And we'll do everything we can. And that's also why I like doing this day in history at the beginning of class, because it does give us a little variety of world events that we can investigate and talk about and kind of activate everybody's brains at the beginning of class. Other than that, I would say contact me at blsensenig@cacalico.org if you have questions. Students can send me Schoology messages here. I think also that parents can set up Schoology messaging accounts and probably could send me messages that way too. Please let me know if you have any questions. And I just would emphasize that reading the textbook and keeping up with what's going on daily in the class is really critical for the students. And that means even though they don't have the textbook in their hands, they got the PDF on their screens, reading what we are getting to and reading the assignments before we get there is very critical. And that's something I would emphasize, from your end. But of course, if you have any questions, you let me know. And I think I covered everything I had on my little outline here. And that's the basics of world studies. Please get in touch with me if you have any questions. Thank you.